Tiny abandoned bear cub followed a farmer home. What happened next will melt your heart. The morning fog lay thick over the rolling fields of Cedar Valley, painting the landscape in shades of gray and silver. Farmer Elias Harper had spent decades tending these lands, rising before sunrise to check the fences, feed the livestock, and tend to the soil that had been in his family for generations. Yet, despite the comfort of routine, there was an emptiness he could not shake. His wife had passed years ago, leaving the farmhouse eerily quiet except for the low hum of the wind and the occasional crow's caw. As he trudged along the edge of the eastern pasture, inspecting the broken fence posts from last night's storm, a faint rustling caught his attention. At first, he thought it was a fox, perhaps a stray coyote, but then he noticed a tiny trembling shape peeking from behind a cluster of thorn bushes. It was no fox, it was a bear cub, no bigger than a household dog, its fur matted and damp, its wide brown eyes glistening with fear. The cub froze as Elias approached slowly, each step measured, his hand resting on the weathered handle of his walking stick. Despite years of experience with animals, he felt a jolt of uncertainty. The cub had no mother, no one to protect it. And yet, there was something in its gaze, a silent plea, that made his heart ache. For several minutes, the cub watched him, its small nose twitching in the crisp morning air. Finally, with a soft, almost inaudible whimper, it took a hesitant step toward him. Elias knelt down, lowering his height to seem less threatening. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, his voice steady but gentle. The cub blinked, then cautiously edged closer, its tiny paws sinking into the moist grass. By the time he reached the farmhouse, the cub was following his every move, its trust growing with each careful step. Elias Harper couldn't have known that this tiny, abandoned creature would soon turn his quiet life upside down, and in ways that would warm his heart more than he ever imagined. Elias stood in the doorway of his farmhouse, the morning sun just beginning to pierce through the mist, casting long golden rays across the worn wooden floorboards. The cub sat a few feet away, trembling slightly, its little chest rising and falling with nervous breaths. Elias could see the faint scars along its tiny body, remnants of a harsh life on its own. He sighed, running a hand over his weathered face. "Poor thing," he murmured. He knelt slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. The cub tilted its head, ears twitching, unsure whether to trust this stranger. Elias noticed how its fur, though matted, had a soft sheen where the sunlight touched it. It reminded him of the dogs he had raised as a boy, full of life, innocent, and completely dependent. Reaching into his coat pocket, Elias pulled out a small piece of leftover bread from breakfast. He broke it into tiny crumbs and placed them on the ground between them. The cub hesitated, sniffing the air cautiously. Hunger eventually overcame fear, and it nibbled at the crumbs, its eyes never leaving Elias's face. A small smile tugged at his lips. "See? I just want to help you," he whispered. For the next hour, he sat there, letting the cub grow accustomed to his presence. Every so often, it would shuffle a little closer, brushing against his boots or sniffing his hands. Elias felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose beyond tending fields and fences. Here was a life that needed him, and somehow, instinctively, he knew he was meant to be its guardian. By mid-morning, the cub followed him everywhere, trailing his footsteps across the yard, through the barn, and toward the old wooden porch. Each step they took together seemed to seal an unspoken bond, fragile yet undeniable. Elias Harper realized then that this tiny abandoned bear cub was not just a creature in need, it was the beginning of a chapter in his life he had never expected, one filled with joy, challenges, and the kind of connection that could heal the deepest loneliness. The farmhouse smelled of fresh hay, old wood, and the faint scent of morning coffee as Elias opened the door wider, motioning for the cub to enter. Hesitant at first, the little creature stepped cautiously onto the wooden porch, its tiny claws clicking softly against the planks. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating its soft brown fur, highlighting every patch of matted hair that told a story of survival. Elias guided the cub gently inside, using a soft voice to reassure it. "Easy now, you're safe here," he whispered. The cub sniffed every corner, from the worn rug in the living room to the edge of the fireplace, before curling up near the warmth of the hearth. Elias chuckled softly at the sight, a warmth spreading through his chest that had been absent for years. He had always known solitude, but now the silence of the house felt less like loneliness and more like anticipation, the anticipation of a new life together. After fetching a small bowl of water and some leftover oats, Elias sat on the floor beside the cub. It cautiously approached, sniffing the food before taking tentative bites. With each small movement, the trust between them grew. Every time the cub nudged his hand or pressed against his knee, Elias felt a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. He had cared for animals before, farm dogs, the occasional stray, but this was different. This was raw, vulnerable, and utterly dependent on him. By the afternoon, the cub had made the living room its temporary home, exploring small corners and peeking curiously around furniture. Elias observed quietly, marveling at its inquisitive nature. He could see the beginnings of personality forming, a shy tilt of the head, the careful inspection of every shadow, the playful swat at a stray piece of yarn. As twilight approached, Elias prepared a soft bedding of blankets near the fireplace. The cub huddled into the makeshift nest, sighing contentedly, finally relaxed in the presence of its newfound guardian. Elias sat back in his chair, gazing at the tiny creature with a profound sense of awe. What had started as a quiet, foggy morning had transformed into the first day of a lifelong bond, one that would challenge him, change him, and ultimately fill the emptiness that had lingered for so long. The days passed with a gentle rhythm as Elias adapted to life with the tiny bear cub. Mornings began with feeding, a careful mix of milk and mashed fruits he had learned from wildlife guides, followed by playful, cautious interactions that strengthened their bond. Each time the cub stumbled or fell, Elias would scoop it up, whispering words of encouragement, feeling a strange blend of joy and responsibility. Elias quickly realized that raising a wild cub, as the cub grew, so did its personality. Shy at first, it began showing flashes of boldness, pawing at Elias's boots, nuzzling his hands, or climbing onto the chair beside him. Elias found himself talking to the cub more than anyone else, sharing the quiet thoughts of a man used to solitude. The cub's soft brown eyes seemed to understand, responding with gentle nuzzles or playful nudges, as if affirming a silent conversation only they could share. Elias also improvised a safe little enclosure in the corner of the barn, lined with hay and blankets, giving the cub a cozy space while keeping it protected. Nights were often the hardest, the cub whimpering for comfort, missing the warmth of a mother it would never know. Elias would sit beside it, stroking its fur, whispering promises of safety. These moments, quiet and tender, formed the foundation of their unbreakable bond. Through feeding, play, and careful observation, Elias learned more about resilience, trust, and the surprising depths of companionship. Each day with the cub reinforced a truth he hadn't realized before. Even in the solitude of a lonely life, connection could bloom, unexpected and miraculous, bridging the gap between species and hearts alike. Spring arrived, and with it came the cub's boundless energy. What had once been a tiny trembling creature was now a lively, mischievous little bear, full of curiosity and a surprising sense of adventure. Elias quickly realized that caring for it meant more than feeding and sheltering. It required patience, vigilance, and creativity to ensure the cub's safety. One morning, the cub darted toward the fence separating the pasture from the dense forest beyond. Elias called urgently, but the little bear hesitated only briefly before bounding toward the trees. Heart-pounding, Elias chased after it, worried about predators or accidents. Reaching the cub just in time, he scooped it up, holding it close while scolding gently. The incident reminded him that no amount of love could replace caution. This was a wild animal, unpredictable and strong even in its small size. The cub's curiosity extended to Elias's tools, the barn shelves, and even the old tractor. Objects toppled over, hay scattered, and Elias often found himself laughing despite the mess. Yet beneath the mischief, there was trust. Each time the cub ran back to him after exploring, Elias felt the profound satisfaction of earned loyalty. The bond between them was growing stronger with every shared meal, every playful tussle, every quiet evening by the fireplace. Elias also faced external challenges. Neighbors were wary of a bear cub roaming near the farmhouse. Wildlife authorities visited, offering guidance and caution, reminding him of the cub's wild instincts. Elias listened carefully, determined to strike a balance between nurturing the cub and preparing it for a life outside human care. Through it all, the cub learned from him, and he from it. Lessons in patience, empathy, and respect for nature became daily rituals. When the cub finally slept soundly in its cozy corner at night, Elias would watch, heart full, marveling at the resilience and spirit of the tiny creature he had chosen to protect. In raising the cub, he discovered that love was not just about comfort, it was about guidance, boundaries, and letting go when the time came. By late spring, the cub had grown noticeably, its fur glossy and its movements confident. No longer a tiny trembling creature, It now explored the farmhouse and surrounding fields with playful assurance. Elias watched with pride as the little bear chased butterflies across the meadow and investigated the edge of the forest, its instincts both wild and gentle. Yet, with growth came the realization that the cub could not remain inside the farmhouse forever. Elias understood that part of love was knowing when to let go. He contacted a nearby wildlife rehabilitation center, arranging for professionals to guide the cub toward eventual independence. Though the thought of separation weighed heavily on his heart, he knew it was necessary. The day of the transition arrived. The cub followed Elias to the edge of the forest, hesitant but trusting. Elias knelt, speaking softly. "You've grown strong, little one. It's time to explore the world you were meant for." The cub pressed its small body against him one last time, letting out a gentle whuffle as if acknowledging the bond they shared. Wildlife experts arrived and gently guided the cub toward its temporary enclosure, explaining the